Hola community! Welcome to another episode of Blender.Today live. I'm a bit dark here. How are you doing this week? We have a bunch of announcements. Couple of announcements, things people were waiting for in a while. Some sad news as well regarding the Blender conference, but a bunch of great news regarding the branches. Cycles X, it's getting fairly complete. Like all the big things that were missing once the when Cycles was announced a couple months ago, it's they've been taken care of. So let's start without further ado. Thanks to everybody here in the chat for giving me the thumbs up. I'm testing a new setup. I ran an upgrade on the weekend and I shouldn't have done that. I broke my entire system, so everything is new for me here. First, let's go with the sad news and then the happy news. First sad news is that the Blender conference is moving to next year. It's not gonna happen this year. Last year it also didn't happen in person, but it happened in online fashion. So this year it could have been done the same, but instead the focus would be to have the other big events that are happening around Blender. Remember, this year we have the release of the new Open Movie project. Well, we have one every year, so it's not like it's still a big deal. Sprite Fright, the new Open Movie project. However, the other big event that doesn't happen every year, actually it's gonna be the first one in over 20 years, which is Blender 3 coming out this year. So there is enough reasons to hang out. So also on top of that, because of Blender 3, the Blender Foundation ton, and the developers are thinking about making I don't know if it's a code quest per se. Remember, if you're new around here, Blender 2.8, the big change between Blender 2.7 and the new, more modern looking version was mainly thanks to a big development event that happened here in Amsterdam. Started here in Amsterdam for 3 months. Developers from all over the world came here, and then it continued for like a year. That it's not gonna be maybe as big. However, smaller workshops, because of the nature that we live in now, that we cannot gather everybody at the same time here at the studio, especially because of traveling restrictions. So smaller teams. Maybe a module workshop, so the UI team and the sculpt team, the grease pencil team, and then smaller teams can gather here in Amsterdam and online, thanks to having a lot of space at the studio. All the precautions regarding Corona could be taken care of. So what are people saying? What, Pablo on Windows? How do you know that I'm on Windows? Yes, I am. How did you find out? I am not completely happy about it, but yeah, it was the only thing that I could make work without banging my head against the computer. I was, yeah, I ran an update. I doubt he's on Windows. Actually, I am. Windows sounds? Do you hear Windows sounds? I tried to remove everything, but yeah, maybe the right click. I don't know. I haven't used Windows in 15 years, so I don't know how to use this thing. I feel so noob. Anyway, this is the sad news of the day. Let's move into the happy. Not that I am using Windows. That's not the sad news. Although it's a bit sad for me because it's new. Although I'm gonna be 35 this year. Isn't that the midlife crisis kind of a thing? Anyway, the big news. It's not related to Blender Foundation at the moment. However, it's a render engine that is external, that is an industry standard for many, that is supporting Blender natively. Now it's Renderman, Pixar's Renderman, the one that is the render engine that is used for rendering all your favorite films. It's now officially supporting Blender as part of the Renderman 24, the version number 24. You can see it's just amazing, like the presentation, and also it's like what a trailer. Like well, we have the Blender community, but they have this yeah, they can have a Pixar films to show off. So yeah, It has a bunch of new features, but let's go to the sweet stuff here. Look at that. Look at Renderman inside of Blender. She's like Eevee or Cycles, or they say it's sped up in some parts of the video, but yeah, it's very interesting to see what how they're moving Blender, how they're shaping Blender UI to work with that. I mean, look at that. They have like thumbnails in the menu entries. So yeah, it's interesting. It's not free and it's not open source, of course, but it's I think it's free. Like you can use it for non-commercial projects. I'm not sure about the license, so you should check it out if you can use it. But I think it was like some time ago they made it free for if you want to test it. So for non-commercial projects, it should be there. I don't know if it has a watermark or anything. I couldn't test it, although now I'm on Windows, so maybe I can test it now. There's so many things that I can test now that they weren't available when I was on Linux, and the other way around. Okay, I still don't know how to compile Blender here, so I'm gonna use the build-bot build. So let's get started with the actual changes in Blender right now. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so I have a bunch of sections today. I have the performance, the grease pencil, the geometry nodes as always, but let's start with one that is always a good one to share. Performance. And also now I can use my Stream Deck because it now has a UI. Otherwise on Linux you have to use an app. That's sad though that the companies don't support that. Okay, let's go to performance. You know what else? It's cool besides performance. This is when it's on the basic things, such as transforming or editing your mesh. Edit mesh keeps getting improved. It's faster now for modes such as when you're transforming, like when you're changing the bevel weight, or crease, or pulling, when you're push or pulling the edges, the faces, rotate. Rotating is faster now. Shear, shrink, fatten, yeah, the Alt S, I love that one. Skin, resize, to sphere, trackball, and translate. So pretty much everything. So trackball, rotation, and translate. So pretty much everything is now faster. How much faster? Well, it's multi-threaded, so it depends on how many cores your computer has. In this test from Campbell, in a 1.5 million polygon mesh on a 32 core system, so quite a system, the performance improvement was around 20 and 28%, which is huge. It's wow, that is super cool. And the more, I mean, in the future I guess we're gonna have more and even more cores, so this can only get better. This is also for bend. I think here wasn't, but it wasn't listed, but the bend operator was added right after this commit. Super neat. Another improvement for performance has to do with the API by changing using vMesh operators, so the mesh system operators via the API. Apparently it was creating a full copy that wasn't completely necessary, and now in high poly meshes it's giving an update or a speed up of around 1.77 for X for most operators, so 1.77 times faster around that time. Very precise, 0.77. Okay, let's continue. Audio poor quality and low. Is it? I have it as usual and as always. I don't know if it seems a bit low. I hope it goes away, or I can fix it somehow. I have the sound system a bit lower, but it should be okay. I upped it here. I don't know how to use this thing. I need practice. You know what else has been improved? Actually, is a regression fix that was happening on the exact Boolean modifier. So at some point, I don't know exactly when, it's not mentioned here in the commit, but there was a regression where it was much slower, and now it's should be actually twice as fast, at least on this test, with a 3.1 million faces Boolean. It went from 100 seconds to 50 seconds. So yeah, half the time. It's a regression though, so a regression is that it's when something used to be on one way and then stop being that way. Usually it's a feature or a render feature, for example, that it no longer works how it should, then that is a regression, and those are very important to get fixed. So if I think this hasn't been migrated to 2.93, so it's probably in master, so it should be okay. Okay, let's continue. The next section of today is talk about Grease Pencil / LINEART. It's all one big section nowadays. The first improvement is a new modifier. So ring the new modifier alert for Grease Pencil. It's to generate weights dynamically. So vertex weight. Let's see the commit log. This new modifier allows you to generate weights based on the angle of the stroke relative to the object or the world orientation. For example, if the value is 90, the maximum weights will be for vertical lines and minimum for horizontal lines. Okay, so depending on the angle of the object or the world, it's gonna change the vertex weight. So the vertex groups. So you can use that for anything, really. So you specify it in degrees and the axis and the space. That's nice. And then there's another setting, which is not the angle, and another mode for the vertex weight calculation, which is distance. So you can use the distance between an object, the start and the end, and then it gives you the weights. There's a minimum parameter, allows you to define the weight, the minimum weight generated. This is useful to avoid very low weights. Yeah, and if you want to have like if you're using it for thickness, to control the thickness, for example, you can you can specify a minimum distance, a minimum thickness with that. So in this example over here, they're using the vertex weight. So it's using an empty, this empty, to control the vertex group called output group that is used in the thickness modifier right after it. So if you're familiar with the vertex weight edit or proximity, I think this is a mix because it also allows you to use distance. So that is the proximity version of the vertex weight modifier in meshes. Seems to be doing something similar. There's a new thickness mode that has been added to use the weight to modulate the original thickness of the stroke, which could be used, for example, to make the stroke thinner based on the distance of the camera. Okay, this is a bit less clear to follow, but as you can, has been used to weight to modulate the original thickness of the stroke, like an override. Okay, this one I'm gonna have to use to give it a second read, but if you're familiar with this already, this is the weighted thickness. Okay, so we used to have only uniform thickness. This is a new option I was missing. That's so cool. I don't know, it's called vertex weight, I guess, because you can do both, like edit and proximity. So I guess it's fine, but it kind of sounds like it should be vertex weight edit to me. I don't know, what do you guys think? If you have experience in that area, let us know. The other improvement related to modifiers in Grease Pencil is the new weight factor setting in the offset randomize, in the offset modifier in the randomize sector. So the weight is used in the randomized parameters of the offset modifier. This is useful to generate effects like explosions. Okay, and I guess the weight factor is also, it's not related to the new vertex weight, so pretty neat. All right, let's see a bit more. The next, it's related to LINEART. Let's see, filtering. Yeah, this one. More flexibility in the way intersection lines are calculated. Now they're going to be using mask numbers. So yeah, the interface could be better. If you're familiar with the way transparency masks in LINEART work, this is similar, but it's for the intersection lines. So you can achieve things like this. You can, depending on how or which collection intersects with another collection, then you can give it different LINEART effects, for example, or even in different LINEART sections. So if the character, if you want the character hair to have a special line, for example, when it meets the collection of the face, then you can use this. When it's as a background, for example, then you can give it a separate outline. So yeah, the possibilities are endless. However, yeah, the interface is the 20 little boxes that it looks very much like Blender 2.7. Goodness. Okay, time to move into the next section, which is video sequence editor. Yes. This improvement is has to do with snapping. Actually, it's more like introducing snapping. Right now, the snapping in Blender video sequence editor was very limited. You have the operator that you have to execute every time you want to snap to something, or if you move the strip on top of another strip, then you have some kind of snapping, automatic snapping. However, this is real snapping. It's a new setting in the header that you can use. It's familiar. It's gonna look familiar to how it is in the sequencer. So let's see. Here there is a discussion. Okay, I can try to open Blender, but I remember I am on the first thing I opened when I installed Windows. The first thing I looked up is this, the way how to transform windows that I use all the time on Linux. It's called Alt Drag. If you want to use it, it's open source. So yeah, I'm trying to only install open source software so far for doing these kind of things, basic things of moving windows. Let's go to the new video editing. Here in video editing, there's a new snapping button there, which is on by default. So if you drag, let's change the color just to make it a bit more obvious. Okay, I have the red and I have the green. So if I'm right now, snapping is on by default. Maybe I can make this slightly larger so you guys can see better here. So it's on by default, which means that if you drag a strip, it's gonna snap it. Also for the handles, it should work the same. So this is like if someone is watching this from used to other softwares, then it sounds very basic. It is very basic, but it's still so awesome to see it finally in Blender. There's many options too. You can snap to the current frame or to the other strips. So if you drag and drop, it should snap there. Also, if you have it off, oh, the shortcut doesn't work. Shift tab. I think we should add Shift tab, right? Because in here it works. Yeah, we should add the Shift tab shortcut. Then if you don't have it on, it should be with Control, right? Yes. Yeah, with Control it works. Ah, that's cool. And it even gives you a preview of where it's gonna snap. So you can have it off if you want, and it's gonna behave just like in the edit mode or any other editor. There was a discussion going on around having it on by default. What do you guys think? That it should be on by default or not? Because there is no other editor, especially the 3D view, that has snapping on by default. It's usually off, always. unless you turn it on with Shift Tab, or if you hold Control, then it's gonna turn on snap temporarily as you transform. However, yes, how it should be. I think it should be on by default. I prefer it this way. But yeah, also because if you hold Control, then the snapping goes away temporarily. So yeah. How's the chat going on? Okay, so snapping should be on by default. Should be on by default. Should be on by default. Whoa, here. Okay, so it should be on by default. On by default. Everybody says on by default. Okay, so it's okay the way it is right now. It's a bit confusing that in the other editors is not on by default, but yeah, we should add the shortcut, and this feature should be good to go. All right, time to change topics. Let's go to the big one. There is a bunch of new updates, and the name of this episode has to do with geometry nodes. Geometry nodes. So what's new in geometry nodes? Well, a whole lot. There was curve support added some time ago. You know, you can create curves. Well, you couldn't create. Yeah, you could transform into curves. You could do some operations. But now the big missing part of curve support was added, which is primitives, curve primitives. The same way we have mesh primitives in geometry nodes. Now there is which were added to 2.93. If you remember, that's one of the big things in 2.93. It's that now curves have primitives. Okay, how do they work? Well, for example, let's start with the basics. Primitive circle. You have a new node called circle. Just a few settings. It's a curve, so yeah, really not much exciting there. But hey, primitives get exciting when you can have control points, such as the spiral. So if you create a curve and then you offset it, then you have a spiral. Actually, the commit is called spiral, but this commit is for the star. Got confused. Johnny, thank you for coding it. This is amazing. Let's see. Curve primitive stars. Have you ever wanted to make stars in Blender in an easy way? Well, now you can. Although the screenshot shows using many of the other nodes that I'm going to show, which is a Bezier segment, and then joining them. But there is, and this is basics. Okay, so is it a new node or not? Curve primitive star. The spiral, though, it's in another commit that I can show you. This is the actual spiral one, and it's called spiral. It's a new node that creates this kind of shape by using resolution, rotations, radius, height. So similar to the spin, actually. Should it be called spin? Because in the Blender regular mesh edit mode is called spin. Not sure. Let us know in the comments somewhere, not below. The other improvements, let's see, more segments. So you can create segments inside the node editor. One of them is a quadratic Bezier segment, which allows you to do little things such as this. Has a start, a middle, and an end with a quadratic way. There is the core primitive Bezier segment, which is another separate node, which allows you to do the kind of shape that we were showing before. Also has a start and a start handle, an end handle, and an end. So you can, okay, so in this case, let's see this demo. In this demo, we have the object info, which is using an empty for number 1 for the start. Then this using another empties location for the second, the third, and the fourth. So you can control, you basically are rigging or creating a curve on the fly using the location of empties. That is, that's awesome. All right, default, and this is how it ends. That's very neat. Okay, you know what else is neat? That the developer that coded this feature, Johnny Matthews, not only he coded the features, but also he is on YouTube and he made a video.
Johnny here. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 new geometry nodes that I coded up that have been accepted into the Blender code base.
All right, so YouTuber coders are a thing now. That is awesome. It's super well explained.
Squares, pentagons, and so forth and so on.
You have developers making YouTube videos now. Isn't that amazing? So the feature that was that was just added, it also contains a video, documentation by the developers themselves. So yeah, go give it a like. I'm gonna share the link on the chat there, so you can go and I guess subscribe. It's everything Blender educational. Yes, okay, yes, go. I can recommend them subscribing. That's super awesome. Thank you, Johnny, for making not only the features but also documentation. Super important. And who's better than the developers themselves to add that? Okay, more improvements in the geometry nodes workflow. It's a new panel that will display the list of attributes on meshes. So this has been being worked on for a while by Jack Luke. He implemented it, he committed it last week, but basically it's a new panel that it will show the attributes, the generic attributes in the mesh. So it's easier to find and easier to create new attributes by hand, basically. So not via the geometry nodes editor, but you can go and manually create those. It's very clear. I like how it looks. I don't know if you get to see there, but it shows the name of the attribute, the domain, and the type, the data type of it. So let's continue. The next improvement has to do with usability. Do you know in the compositor that there is a Ctrl-Shift-Click shortcut for using a viewer, for connecting a viewer? Then the not geometry nodes, but the Node Wrangler add-on has this kind of a hack for cycles. Ctrl-Shift-Click, and inside, under the hood, it makes an emission node. It's a hack, but it's there for cycles. I think everybody's used to it. Now it's recently was added for geometry nodes, but now geometry nodes has a built-in viewer node that for the time being is a bit limited. It replaces the icon in the header to show the current node in the spreadsheet editor. So it's limited at the moment, but in the future, having this specific viewer node is very flexible, because it allows you to have settings. For example, I personally never been a huge fan of having a viewer node, like a node that just works as a viewer, because yeah, you forget where you put it, and then it makes a noodle that goes all the way if you have the node at the beginning of the or at the very end of your setup, and then you connect it to one of the first nodes. Then you have this line that goes all across the editor, and it gets a bit annoying too, I think. However, there are many benefits to having a viewer node. You could have settings in there. If you know the SphereShock add-on or animation nodes add-on, they even go as far as having a 3D viewer node, or a viewer node where you can toggle settings and properties, visibility, overlays. So it's very flexible in a way. The current implementation is a bit limiting, but the future is bright. Okay, the other change, well, this is related to what we just saw, because the Ctrl-Shift-Click in geometry nodes is now taken. The geometry nodes shortcut for Node Wrangler to add a viewer is now Shift Alt left click. So this should only affect geometry nodes though, so you should be able to continue working as usual in the other editors that use this shortcut. The next, okay, now I think it's time to switch rigging. So this rigging is always a mystery to me. There are improvements to constraints. First, the first constraint is a new space, outer space. There is a new setting for local space, which is the owner orientation. Let's see what the developer Alexandra Gavrilov has to say about this. Okay, so this adds a new transformation space choice for bone constraints, which represents the local transformation of the target bone in the constraints owner's local space. Are you following? Stay with me. Let's see this other line. It's a bit more clear. Okay, the use case for this is, for example, transferring the local motion of one bone to another bone while ignoring the difference between their rest pose orientations. If you want to read more, go see the link here. It's in developer.blender.org/D9493. It's the name of the differential of the patch. And this other improvement has to do with constraint as well, particular with the copy transform constraint. There is a new setting called remove target shear, so when it gets distorted to the sides, and there are a few new mix options have been added. You can see, I think there is a picture over here about the new mix settings that have been added. And also there is, this is just for fun, it's super it's cool that they added this, that Alexander did this. So it's a mock-up of an equivalent node setup that, yeah, it's equivalent to the new setting for the mix types. That isn't that crazy? I understand nothing about this. That's super cool. Okay, the next, I think we're just wrapping up very close. Okay, so the next is more like a potpourri section. This is a Python change in the API, so this is more target to people that are making add-ons. There is a new or add-ons or your own scripts. There is a new support for the operator menu enum. If you're using that now, you can return the operator properties. So you can set the settings from there, just like you can with the regular UI layout operator. So if you don't know what I've just said, you understand it's probably you didn't need that feature. Another update in the potpourri section is that the NanoVDB, the OpenVDB library that has been added a few, I think in the last release or 2 releases ago to improve memory, now has been fixed, well, has been updated to the latest version, which fixes some cases where the volumetric, the voxels were not found. So Blender is now using the latest NanoVDB library. And last but not least, this also target mainly at developers, and also good news for users, because there is a new performance testing framework. What does it mean? Well, it's a bunch of scripts that run benchmarks of Blender features in general using real-world blend files. And this is awesome, not only because you can test if the feature works as expected, but also you can test performance. This was first implemented for testing cycles, but also now can be used for testing any or more Blender features. This is great, not only because it can be used to test that nothing broke, but also it can be used as part of Blender's continuous integration. So Blender's build bot, for example, could have a task that runs every day that runs these benchmarks and it stores the results somewhere on a database. For example, we could use the opendata.blender.org, and that way we could track the performance of certain features over time. That was super cool to know. Okay, how slow was rendering SSS in 3 years ago, and how is it now, for example, in the same computer, right? So yeah, super neat that has been added. Okay, and the last but actually this one is the last but not least. Again, if you follow this show, you know that I don't usually mention branches. However, Cycles X is the exception here to the rule, because it's gonna become part of Cycles soon, and it's getting more complete. If you're using it for rendering faster, you should be glad to know that support for multi-GPU or multiple devices. So multiple GPU or CPU plus GPU has been added. So yeah, unleash all your 3090s, 3080s, or regular other graphics cards to actually compare how it actually is, how much faster it is. I'm very curious to see how this works, because I've seen some benchmarks as soon as Cycles X was announced of other render engines compared to Cycles X. But yes, other render engines were actually using multiple devices, whereas Cycles X wasn't. So let's see how it compares. Also, this is the initial support, so it's gonna get better over time. There's already a few commits after this one that make it even better, but it's great to hear that there is also many more performance and memory improvements planned to avoid recalculations and to make it more optimized. And also, that was one of the big things missing in Cycles X, multiple devices. And the second big thing that was missing is volume support, which now has been added, and it's even more complete than previously. Brings back volume rendering support that it was before on the GPU. So it's a beginning. That means scattering, emission, and heterogeneous volume with stepping. There is now, I think now there is only heterogeneous. Now there is no more separation between homogeneous and heterogeneous. So yay for less settings. And that is it. Okay, another branch that I'm also excited. It's not Cycles X, is the XR. I think on the last few episodes of Blender.Today, I always talk about this. They keep adding new features. Well, Peter keeps adding new features every week. Now there is haptic feedback support for VR in a branch. Again, this is a branch. It's called XR controller support if you want to test it. But yeah, that's awesome. There is even settings for it. Yeah. Okay, that is all for the news improvements in Blender. Time to, I didn't even drink a mate today. Let's check out if there's any questions in Blender.community. Let's check it out. Okay. Okay. Oh, geez, that was cold. Yes, there is a thread. Let's see how many questions are. Thank you, San Souls, for creating this thread. Let's see. The first question, I'm gonna zoom in. Maybe I can flip. I have a button to flip. Let's see I don't mess up. There you go. Okay. Hey Pablo, I hope you're having a great day. I am. Thank you for asking. It's actually a bit too warm even. As someone who specializes in UI UX for Blender, right? Yes. Sometimes more than others. Sometimes I don't have it all the time. I have to do other things related to communication in Blender, which is my main job, is in communication. But yeah, what is your opinion of having that controversial camera lock gizmo located right underneath the margin of the camera view? Maybe near the bottom right corner. That way it doesn't get associated with the navigation gizmos it could also be tied to individual cameras. So its on off state depends on which camera view you're in. Okay, so if you're not following what Chris is talking about, there was, for a very brief period of time, there was a setting here when you were in the view camera. Here it was a little lock icon that will toggle the lock camera to view setting. So when you move the camera, it would move when you navigate, it would move the camera as well, which if you look at this from another point of view, okay, so if I rotate the camera, it's moving the camera, so it is changing my transform, is distractive in a way, and because that setting is distractive, is changing the location that you so carefully added, it didn't really belong in this part of the UI, because all these settings are just if you don't have the camera lock, these are just always the non-destructive, right? It's just moving your view. It's not really making any change. So also the icon wasn't the greatest. It was a different design than these icons, and the feature got removed until there's a better design. Basically, it shouldn't be here, or at least there should be like a separator, or it should be a kind of a different setting, or maybe it should be on somewhere in the camera itself, you know, like somewhere here, or I don't know. Okay, as a side comment, if it does get added, it might make sense for locked to mean locked in place, which could be the default, and unlocked mean you can move it around with the navigation control. Okay, so to invert it, you mean it's kind of the opposite of how it always worked, but it would be the simplest and easiest way to convey via a simple icon. And honestly, seems like it would be the easiest to understand for newbies. That's a good point. I never thought of it. To invert the behavior of the lock camera to view. But yeah, near the bottom right corner. So you mean here? I don't know. There are other settings that should be that could be as part of the view as well, and I wonder if like it should be like one commit that adds all of those and not just one lowly icon in one area. We don't have on the bottom, we don't have any indicators anywhere like we used to have in 2.7, the axis here that got moved up here, but we don't have. So maybe bottom centered. I don't know. We need to see mockups, so to see actually how it would look and feel. Thanks for the awesome show, and thank you to all the amazing developers that make Blender awesome every day. Thank you. All right, next question by Sako4K. Hey Pablo, I was wondering if there is any plan for the wireframe modifier to have a segments option instead of the base 4 sides, where you can increase the segments and the geometry becomes smooth. Also, lots of love to Blender from Palestine. Love to Palestine. For the wireframe modifier to have a segments option instead of the 4, like subdividing it. Where you can increase the segments and the geometry becomes smooth. I'm not sure I follow the wireframe modifier, but what happens if you add like segments inside? So like having a subdivision modifier with simple or with smooth, so you can control which wires you want. Not sure I follow. Here I'm reading the chat. Wireframe modifier could also use vertex group support. Yeah, right. I think a vertex group should be more flexible for that. Not sure I follow. Sorry. Just one question. Is there any plans for onion skin for 3D? Not that I know, but there are a few add-ons I think that do it with a bit of a hack. But no, I don't know if there's any plans at the moment by the animation team. Hi Pablo, I know you're not in America, but happy 4th of July anyway. No, I'm not in America. I am in the Netherlands. But thank you, and happy 4th of July to you. And 5th of July. I hope I posted this question on the DevTalk forums, but no developer seemed interested in replying, so I would like to try it with you. Okay. I often read how Blender's performance, specifically high poly models, scenes, simulations, is not on par with other DCCs. The reason often given is that other DCCs are optimized to perform a select few tasks very well, and because Blender focus is more broad, its performance inherently suffers. Is that true? Well, partially true, but also partially, like, Blender is the only open source software out there, right? So any other DCC, not only it's optimized, like if you compare sculpting with ZBrush, for example, it's not a fair comparison, I guess, because then you can't do animation with ZBrush. You can't do all the other features that allows you, that gives you the flexibility, or like go into edit mode and do all the same level of editing you can in edit mode with Blender on other software. So it's I think it's kind of served as an excuse for a long time, but I think Blender should not fix this, but improve this in a way that we can have a bit of both. Part of that, I don't know if you read the blog post on the code blog that talked about having a specific mode in the editor in the 3D view, for example, where you can preview lots of, like, optimized to previewing lots of polygons, like billions of polygons, like some game engines are doing nowadays. They can preview billions of polygons, but they can't go in edit mode and edit each one of those polygons. So there has to be maybe a mix of that, maybe a way to perform for tasks. So if you are sculpting and you know you're only gonna be pushing vertices around, not removing or doing crazy editing, maybe that could be done, can be optimized in that way. The question continues: will Blender sculpting performance ever match or exceed that of ZBrush? I don't think it's a race. I just don't think they are tools for the same tasks. What about Houdini simulations? Well, come on, we can't compare with Houdini. It's like the king or queen of and they've been around forever. It's I don't think it will ever be the goal to compete with those tools. I think the real potential of Blender is in it being one tool for everything, and also being open source. So it could be expanded in the future for working better with other softwares, especially with the bridges, for example, between apps. I think that would be a better approach, instead of trying to compete with software that's been around for 30 years in the industry, leading and actually bringing innovation, right? Okay, if not exactly why, it's in a matter of Blender Foundation getting time, resources, and talent to make up the difference in performance, or if there's something more fundamental about Blender's core architecture that limits its performance but allows for more comprehensive features compared with other DCCs. No, again, I think it's just a different tools. The core architecture, I can't talk about it because I'm not really familiar with it, but I know performance in Blender, it's getting better, and it's gonna take a big leap once most of the code more of the code gets optimized, not only for multi-threading, but full CAN support. It gets more modern, and I think with the jump in the requirements that happen in Blender 2.8, that step could be taken, but again, it's only a handful of developers that are working on Blender core architecture, and it's gonna take a while. But I think we're going in the good direction. Are there any plans for fully implementing OpenVDB level sets and points yet? No, I think that it will greatly improve the simulation workflow. No, actually, I'm not familiar with it. And the last question here. Hey Pablo, hope you're having a great day. Even though, the last question says, even though the 2021 Blender conference got postponed, we're still looking forward to the virtual event in October. Maybe it would be cool to see Blender Bob there, and any spoilers or anything. No, I just mentioned that there was not going to be an official Blender conference in 2021. However, people are still free to create their own events. That would be maybe a good way to, you know, leave the Blender Foundation, focus maybe on the Blender module workshops, covering that better and making a big release for 3.0. And the community could make their own Blender gatherings local and following the regulations of each place. I think that would be better. The next point, this is about just UI in general, no feature or anything. It's cool that Blender has properties on the node, and it's quite unique and handy for small nodes, but when I have a large fridge size nodes like Principled VSDF or the Raycast or any other 3D party engine, it gets a bit painful to use when I have a small monitor. I have to constantly zoom in and out if collapse the big nodes. There's no way on the name and the inputs. Okay. I think I know where the rest is going. There is a proposal actually and development going on about having a compact version of the nodes. So instead of using it with all the settings in the node itself, that you could use it with the settings in the sidebar. So for example, if you go to shading. Right now, at the moment, it's a bit limited what you can do in terms of hiding, but you can actually hide. If you hit Ctrl H, you're gonna hide the settings that are not connected to anything. So if a setting is not connected, you can hide it, and it doesn't mean it's not gonna get calculated. It still get calculated. It's just not shown in the user interface. I think there's a setting for it. Ctrl H here. Toggle hidden node sockets. The options that are not shown here are actually still available in the sidebar. So you do have that setup right now available. Just use Ctrl H to hide those. The next. Some parts of Blender has colorful icons and some has flat white icons. Colorful icons in the context menus. Depends on if it makes sense in the context menu. Colorful icons are mainly to describe types. So if you have object type, mesh, or data type, modifiers, they all have their own little colors. But yeah, I think we could do even more use of it. Like these are modifiers, so maybe they could be blue, or yeah, I think we could do with a bit more color. Maybe not the entire icon, but maybe partially, like some accent color here and there. But yeah, I'm a advocate for adding a bit more color to some of the icons. Not all of them. Not the rainbow that some other apps have. Okay, next. This is the last bit of the question. This is also about UI and add-on UI to be specific. I think there should be a new UI and way to interact with add-ons in the future in Blender. The end panel is really cool and handy to access quick stuff by add-ons, but if I have 20 add-ons and if the add-ons have a lot of assets and stuff, it gets a bit messy and it takes up a lot of space in the viewport while interacting with the add-on. And the narrow UI kind of makes it look like a software starts with 3. Yeah, okay, this about UI. Come with better solution because I see more of a fictional add-ons. in other softwares. Blender has a lot of add-ons, and yeah, I think Blender has a lot of add-ons, and most of them elevate Blender functionality, and a lot of people rely on a lot of add-ons, and some okay, it's a lot of add-ons are the reason why some people have switched to Blender. So making the add-on ecosystem and UI better will be very welcoming and make life easier for a lot of people, not to mention the fact that I have to manually download the version. Yes, there was somewhat of code about adding an add-on manager, but it wasn't finished on time. Unfortunately, it wasn't successful. But an add-on manager, I think it's so necessary. The same, they're like a keyboard editor is also super necessary. But in terms of add-ons, there are two levels to that. First one, it's Blender's fault, because this is ridiculous. The fact that this happens and that there is no minimum size, this is just super annoying. Like, there are forks of Blender that change the user interface, and there seems to be a lot of time spent in working in changing all the aspects of Blender. But I wonder why they don't just work on something like this. Why don't they put some effort there if you're gonna change the entire Blender? Also, maybe help to fix those issues, or I don't know, make a quick favorites manager also. That would also be a good improvement for Blender and for Blender forks as well. But yeah, it's not so easy apparently. I think this has been tried in the past. There are a few proposals going around for this. My favorite proposal is, I think, the most straightforward, which is having a minimum size for the tabs, and in case they don't fit, just allow to scroll. So if you scroll, you should fit them all. That I think is the most straightforward. The proposal went loops and loops and hoops around for adding, instead of having these tabs, but having here a drop down where you can choose, and then you have like a collection of tabs that you can turn on and off. So it went really overboard. But I think even with that proposal of having a drop down to choose which tabs to show or not, even then, this little thing, this ridiculous one letter or even no letter tabs doesn't help anyone. So it has to be fixed anyway. Also icon support, just like we have here, there needs to be some unification. I think now in the code, these kind of tabs, and these tabs are different. So yeah, we need more developers that love the UI and usability. It's not easy, but yes, I hope that can happen eventually. And okay, and the other part of that issue is that add-on developers, all the add-on developers want to be their star of the show by having their tabs and by having their own tab and their own panels. But there are so many add-ons that could just, instead of making their new tab just for their add-on, could just add a panel here, or a panel here, or a panel anywhere. You can add stuff anywhere in Blender. Why everybody has to add it here in the viewport and not inside of an existing or next to another panel inside of the three built-in tabs? But yeah, that is all. I think I'm over time. Yes, I started a bit later though. I think the stream went okay-ish. There were a few hiccups here and there, but I think it's going well. I'm gonna press the button to, yes, change the full screen. Okay, so the show went fine. There are new features. There is plenty to see. Next week, it's going to be, okay, it seems to be still Beacon 1. There's no defined date to when Blender 3.0 is gonna move from Beacon 1, which is the window for adding new features, into Beacon 2, which is the refining of those new features. So plenty to look forward to. Shall we do it again next week? I think we should. Okay, let me find, I have a little thingy here where I can find the sounds. And look, I have, well, you can't, it's not on focus, but yeah, it's at the count of 3, I'm gonna press the button here. So if you're wearing headphones and if this works, let's meet again next week here, same place, same time, for another episode of Blender Today. There you go.